I know they have assets that can be used in the program to take people out discreetly and professionally, so it doesn't look like it was anything but a suicide. Yeah, I know that they can do those things.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Man on the Run. I'm Digby Furneaux, and I hope you're having an absolutely wonderful day in the crazy world that we are currently living in. It's absolutely insane. But anyway, enough of that. Today's a really special episode for me because not only do I get to welcome to my show my old co-host, Tom Thompson, but we've also got a very special guest joining us as well. But more about that in a second. Let's say hello to Tom. Tom.
Hey. What's up, Digby?
Welcome to my show.
Woo! I remember hearing you come up with this idea. Like I feel like I've been sort of like a part of it since you've like originally thought of it, and it's really cool to see it come to fruition. A lot of people love us together on UA Pod. Obviously, I'm doing that, but you'll be making your appearances, of course. But it's nice to spread out under the new paradigm flag, and I'm covering one thing, you're covering other things, and I think it gives people a little bit more to listen to because there is a lot going on in the world, and UA Pod focuses only on one small section of that when there's a lot of other things that can be spoken about, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, man. I missed you.
I miss you too. I mean, I speak
even
to
though
you
we talk every day.
I miss doing this with you, and it's great that you can come in on my show. I'm going to pop back on what is now your show, and yeah, I think this is great because, as you said, there's more stuff that I want to cover, and that show I couldn't really do that. So this is the best of both worlds for both of us, and it's good to have you on. For those of you who don't know who Tom is, which maybe some of you, but probably most of you do, Tom is a fantastic UFO researcher. He's massive on Twitter at the moment, and he's got some great contacts. Together, me and Tom have done some amazing interviews from people like Gary Nolan, Avi Loeb, Steve Bassett, all these absolutely wonderful guests that we've had on our show. And today is no exception to that. The only difference is it's on my show this time. But today we welcome a very special guest who came out in a Twitter space a few months ago. I say came out, that sounds a bit dodge, but that's not how I mean it. This gentleman came out as a whistleblower. He revealed himself to the world. Do you think that sounds any better?
Yeah, I do, a little bit. It's a little bit more epic.
Well, yeah, absolutely. This gentleman came out in a Twitter space and revealed himself to the world as the next big whistleblower in the UFO or UAP world. And I reached out to him straight away after that Twitter space that was seen by tens of thousands or listened to by tens of thousands of people. I managed to get hold of him. I very quickly introduced him to Tom. We've been great friends ever since. He's been a massive support to me and Tom, and he's also allowed us to make some great connections along the way as well.
Absolutely.
And Tom and I have been looking forward to interviewing this gentleman for quite some time now.
Since we met him.
He is featured, he's featured on James Fox's new documentary that's coming out in the next couple of weeks called The Program, which everybody is eagerly anticipating. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the one, the only, the people's whistleblower, Mr. Jason Sands. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very humbling introduction there. Thank you.
Oh, man.
But coming out, yes, I prefer to be calling it going public.
That's better. That's better.
That's a good. Yeah, that one works.
Yeah.
I would go and edit what I said at the beginning, but it's just too hilarious, so we'll leave it in. But,
yeah, I know. It's funny.
But Jason,
it's fine. I think everybody knows what you mean anyway. We're good.
Jason,
Jay's our friend too, man. You know, we're friends here. This is interesting because it's not like we're just meeting you. You've been a really good guy, and I feel like we've got me and Digby and a few other people. We've kind of gotten to know you over the last few months, and I even put it in the post yesterday. And I said I hope that by the end of our conversation today, people really get a feel for what Digby and I feel about you. That you're a really genuine human being with a big heart, and you're a good person that has had experiences and knows things and has been exposed to things that are quite extraordinary, and you're in a difficult position and need support, and we're here for you. And I hope we get a few more supporters for you after this, because I'm one of the biggest fans of yours, as is Digby, I'm sure, and we're really, really happy that you're here with us right now. Very, very sincerely.
We are.
Thank you, Tom. It means a lot to me that you guys have supported me so well. And I think you guys were one of the first as well that we had a discussion about, etiquette on spaces and,
Yeah.
Having good hosts and stuff. And you guys really exemplify that. So I really appreciate all those things that you guys have been trying to do for the community as well.
We try our best from our little corner. And it does really does mean a lot. So, Jason, for the benefit of everybody who's new to the subject and anybody that hasn't seen or heard of you before, which will be a few, can you give everybody sort of a basic rundown of who you are and what your story is?
Sure. Had a pretty normal life other than having some experiences through life, both for me and my family, that were UAP, NHI kind of related. And then when I was 21, I joined the Air Force. Started my career as a sheet metal guy, fixing aircraft, and then I cross-trained into intelligence, where I began telecommunications monitoring and assessments. And really all that means is you go from site to site um, at the behest of the customers, which are usually the commanders, base commanders, organization commanders, and me and my teams would go and assess the security and make sure that everybody's doing a good job on tightening up their game, making sure the enemy can't get a hold of critical information, that kind of thing. And so I served my first tour of duty out at Sembach, Germany, and then ended up at Nellis. And that's where I got introduced to the program. I did the same job as I did in Germany. Didn't do anything special access program until I got to Nellis. And even part of my tour there was not related to anything that was special. It was just the normal telecommunications monitoring. But my side job for about 3 years of my tour of duty in Nellis was all program related. So that's where I got exposed to quite a lot of strange stuff. Me and my team members, we had 4 of us, and we'd go out from place to place and monitor the phones and whatever else they were using. We'd also do human intelligence kind of things where we'd show up at going away parties and see what kind of intelligence we could gather. And then we'd report back to the directors on all that information. So we got to hear quite a bit. We heard from the directors, the scientists, engineers, you name it, inside the program, all over the United States. So we got a pretty good idea, of what was going on. So anyway, that's what I did. I completed my Air Force career in 2007 honorably after 22 years. Started doing defense contracting jobs, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
So when was, I guess, what was the first instance for you when you realized that there was something else going on, that there was this NHI, non-human intelligence presence? When did that start showing itself in the work that you did? Can you give us any examples of that?
Well, I'd say the very first inkling I had was when they tried to get me to sign up for the retrieval program. That was pretty early on. It was like within a few weeks, actually, of me working with them. They checked me on firearms. And we went out to some place and all that good stuff to see how I shot. Guess I did pretty well. I've always been a good shot because my dad taught me. He was a Green Beret all his life, so I've handled guns since I was a kid. So I passed that test for them, and then they just all of a sudden asked me, hey, do you want to be part of the retrieval team? And I'm like, well, I called it the recovery team, I think at the time, but I was like, what do you mean? and I had them tell me a little bit more on the details. And they were kind of like wink, wink, nod, nod. These things we pick up don't look human, and things like this. And I was like, oh, yeah, about that. I don't think there's a hazmat suit that'll make me feel comfortable around these kind of beings, these kind of toxic materials. And besides, I find that kind of work a bit gross. So I said no kindly, but that was the first inkling I had that there was something different about this. And besides that, the conversation that I had with the individual kind of introduced me to the program. He and I were actually talking about Dreamland, which is, Groom Lake, where the program is. And he definitely sparked my interest after I was introduced to the program.
Yeah.
So I knew then that this is where it was at. This is the program that I was interested in.
So the program, how long were you involved in what we now refer to as the program, and what was generally your day-to-day responsibility?
I was introduced in early 1991, and I finished up in 1994. So it was about 3 years, thereabouts. My job was really to do exactly what I was doing outside the program, but I would be called, late at night on a Friday and told to have my bags packed for the following morning and meet them early in the morning to get on an airplane or whatever. And we'd go to these clandestine locations and do our jobs there. So I was doing the same job both inside and outside, but we had an officer also that when we all had to go on these trips that or on these missions, that the officer would kind of like keep people off our backs. Like if somebody asked where'd Jason go this week, he would be the one back at the unit saying, "Hey, he's working for me. Just he'll be back in a couple weeks," and all that kind of stuff. So he'd kind of buffer off all the people that were interested in what I was actually doing.
So I'm actually really curious, and it's because I've heard similar threads in a couple different things you just said, but so the retrieval team / program that approached you, were they also responsible for picking up anything like more mundane, or was their focus the more extraordinary?
Within the program, it's for the more extraordinary.
Gotcha.
It was only related to what they were doing, and I know that there was already a search and rescue crew that's assigned to the Nels test range if we ever have a downed pilot who's getting trained out there just for normal reasons. And this was not part of that program. So I knew this was something separate. This was a different program of retrieval, and I believed it was solely on the types of retrievals that the program would have wanted to conduct.
You bring up Nellis too. Sure, both of you have seen that piece of footage from Nellis. Are you both of you familiar with the UFO footage that was captured at Nellis? I think at some point in the early 90s of a, I guess you could say a disc-shaped craft, but it's like the original piece of quote unquote like gun cam footage. It's never been debunked. And it's amazing to me that Nellis comes up so often in this conversation, and then that footage exists. I mean, footprints in the sand, if I've ever seen any, that something, is around.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. I was actually uprange the week after that incident. I remember everybody coming back after the first 2 weeks because we would change crews out, and some of the people would stay over from 1 week to the other, depending on whether they had other responsibilities to do, whatever. So they'd trade out with each other on days. But yeah, we had some folks that came back and started talking about that UFO incident, and that was 1994, by the way, Tom.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember it on the news. I was 5, but I remember it. I remember seeing the footage on like Access Hollywood or something very random. But I remember the news story, and I was like, look, saying to my parents, like, "Look, I told you all these books I'm reading."
Yep. Very. It got apparently the gun camera or the cameras are a part of the Nellis test range because, of course, when you're training air crews, and like I was mentioning before, there are sometimes crashes, and they have to identify was this something we could have prevented for flight safety or not. And so they review all the cameras and stuff. So literally every inch of the range is monitored by these cameras. They also have a way of locking on to a given aircraft, and that's what it did with this particular UFO as well. And you can actually see some of the analysis that people have done on that camera, and how it tried to lock on, and they actually observed the UFO jamming that signal and stopping the lock on from taking place until I think after 2 or 3 tries, then it finally locked on. Um, but the second week, that's part of this James Fox film. I kind of go over in detail what my experience was because the following week I actually ran into the pilot of that craft because he was still stuck on the range. Apparently, his craft was damaged by something, and he was disgusted for some reason about the people in the program because I mentioned, well, why don't you just go see the people in the program and get them to fix it because they probably have some high tech stuff. And he got really kind of disgusted about that, and he didn't want any help from them. So I imagine he had some kind of an altercation with them at some point, and maybe that's why his craft was damaged in the first place, and why he was there on the Nellis test range. Because the craft didn't look to me to be uh, capable of like interstellar flight. It looked like more atmospheric type craft, but very very strange looking.
Hmm.
And I go over that in the film. So that's something you'll hear in the film when the program comes out from James Fox.
So this
Wow.
this is a US pilot flying a craft that, well, from what you're saying, sounds like it's almost reverse engineered from some alien technology. Is that what you're saying?
No, when I stepped out of the vehicle, because the individual was running towards the convoy I was in, there were 4 vehicles in the convoy. I was in the lead vehicle, and I stepped out of my car thinking the guy was hypothermic because this was October, very cold in the desert. He had a bluish tint to his skin, and he looked like he was falling over with almost every step he was taking towards us. So I was pretty shocked when I stepped out, and I shut my door, and I looked straight up at him, and I was like, "Good grief, he's not human." Uh, and that's when I realized this was definitely one of the strangest days of my life.
Couldn't even
There we have it.
imagine. I
There you
mean,
go.
how do you tell anybody that, like, obviously you've been on X, you've had these conversations, you've talked to us, but what was it like, maybe having this conversation we're having now, talking about that story with like people that you're close to in life, like family, friends, like, and maybe that didn't happen for a while, but what was it like
Mhm.
talking to the people closest to you about this?
Uh, it was one of shock, first of all, and another, like my wife, she doesn't wouldn't have to believe that it actually happened, but it did. And yeah, I kept my mouth shut for a long time, and she was kind of mad at me about that. That I hadn't even mentioned that I was in the program at all to her all these years. So it's been difficult for them. I think people that are close to me, they just look at me as the kind of a nice guy, just normal, kind of a screw up, I guess. But especially my wife. So I think that's kind of how it's hard for them to understand that I did some of this kind of work, and because I'm just normal dad or husband to them.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a lot different. Kind of like Jesus Christ and going back to his own hometown, and everybody said, "Who are you to teach us anything?"
Right.
Hard to be a prophet in your own hometown, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's the
Quite.
way it felt like.
So
Wow.
you've seen this craft, you've seen this creature. You were able to communicate with them, and this was how far away from Nellis Air Force Base?
The trip is about a 2 hour drive from Nellis Air Force Base because you go up past Indian Springs, and then we would hole up in a hotel called the Burrow Inn. And even then, getting onto the range where we were doing the training for the pilots for this exercise is on Black Mountain. So there's even a long drive to get there as well. It's like a 40-minute drive just to get to the top of Black Mountain every day. And we would do that. So it's about a 2 hour drive. So over 150, 200, something like that. No, about 150 miles.
So you're able to communicate with this being. So how was that communication happening backwards and forwards?
It was both audible and telepathic, and the reason I know it was telepathic is because I could understand everything he said, even though it sounded like gibberish to me when he was speaking audibly. And I was pretty shocked that, how can I understand this guy? He's not speaking English, and how do I understand everything he's saying? So I knew that it had to be telepathic. And then the second thing was, like I was telling you before, when he felt that disgust, the emotional level stuff, it hit me like a wave. It was like I felt disgust. It was like we were both feeling disgust, but the only reason it made me realize that it was coming from him is I was like, I've got no reason to be disgusted with anybody in the program, and I just had to have that awareness of myself that this wasn't me; it was coming from him.
Yeah.
So those were the two indicators that it was telepathic, because it just kind of showed me that not only was I able to understand the words in a conversational level, but this emotional level stuff was very raw and came over me like a wave.
Wow. So the craft, how would you describe what the craft looked like, and how would it crashed? Do you sort of paint the picture for people so they can sort of?
Yeah. Well, it hadn't crashed; it was still intact, and it was just I believe it was the aft or rear portion that had been damaged. The front half looked like a big egg with two horns, big, gigantic ram's horns that went from the very top of the craft all the way down to the bottom, where the points of the ram's horns were used like landing skids, like you would see on a helicopter.
Right.
That was also where the cockpit was there in the front end of that egg shape. And then on the back side of the egg shape was this black pancake, oblong looking uh, dish, or I don't know what else to call it. And that's what was damaged. And it was just sticking out of the back like it was another egg shaped thing, but it was flat like a pancake. And it was about 5 foot long
Mm.
and about 3 foot tall. But the overall craft size was probably about 10 foot. Um, so the overall length of the craft was probably like 15 to 20 foot, maybe bigger. And that's kind of what it looked like. I've drawn pictures of it for James Fox, and I think you'll see a graphics rendition of that. Besides that, you can actually see the report and a good diagram of that craft online if you just look up the Nellis Test Range UFO incident of 1994. There's an entire report on that on a website. There's pictures of the craft. I think they've got the front and the back mixed up on it, though. So you have to kind of look at that a little bit differently. Um, but it is the craft. I mean, it's still the same. It's the same thing I saw sitting on the desert floor that day.
Wow.
And it was about 50 yards off the shoulder of the road on the north side of the road. And the roadways were all dirt there too, so it was very dirty.
It's a bizarre
Out there.
morphology too, and it's weird,
Isn't it?
because I got to be honest, and I'm searching deep into like my brain right now. You're not the first person to describe a craft like this that I've come across, and I can't remember where or who it was, but I remember somebody talking about ram's horns and then them comparing it to sort of like a helicopter. I just can't remember for the life of me who it was, but I'm
Yeah,
getting almost like goosebumps because I'm like, I've heard this before. Where have I heard this before?
It's
yeah.
difficult
There
to
are.
even picture in your head, isn't it? It's
It's weird. It's really hard. I'm probably not even
Yeah,
doing it right, to be fair.
yeah. Well, since I started my journey, I've had a really high-ranking kind of UFO guy tell me that he actually knows some of the people that were there the previous week, or if not the week that I was out there, and that they saw the exact same thing I
Wow.
did. So some you may have heard, maybe one of these people did come forward at some point. That'd be cool to have that person corroborate. But yeah, it was pretty well known. There's a good 10, maybe 15 people that were there at the Black Mountain the week before I was there that saw it come by, because it flew right by the windows and everything, and the valley where I worked and where we all worked there at Black Mountain.
Wow. So what
Sounds like a
happened to this
joyride.
afterwards? How do you come away from this? Do you just leave them to it? Do you drive off? Do you report it? What happens next with this incident?
We didn't report it. During the talk I had with this being or person that didn't look human, I noticed, I kind of at one point remember looking over at the guys in the car, because there were three other individuals in the same vehicle I was, and they all looked like they were numb, like they were zonked out mentally. It kind of made me almost laugh out loud, because they kind of looked like, they're drooling on themselves, kind of thing. Um, but when we left, they all, when this person or this NHI, whatever you want to call him, left and got back in his craft, it was still flyable. It made a funny sound, but and it went up in kind of stair steps. It wasn't smooth at all, so it kind of told me that maybe that was part of the damage that was there. But once he started getting airborne, everybody seemed to come to, wake up, kind of thing. And I was back in the car because it was freaking cold. I had to get the heat, back into me. And we just went off for the day. We just were like, gosh, well, I was just stunned. And that was it. We just didn't talk much about it. I think one other person did remember that day, and I started to bring it up, and they were just like shaking their head, like, I don't want to talk about this. Just don't even,
Oh.
don't even. So there are people in that convoy that probably remember that day. They may not have seen as much as I did, but I've yet to find somebody there that is willing to come forward. I've actually tried to reach out, but I got a hold of one of them, but they ghosted me. So that's their choice. That's their choice.
It happens a
I
lot.
guess some people just don't want the attention. Some people, maybe it terrified them completely, and they just don't want to go through it again.
Right.
A multitude of different things it could be, I guess. So that's your first main experience. Where did you go from that? What other things did you manage to experience while in the program?
Well, I was actually out of the program before that incident in the desert that I just described to you. Earlier that year, I had brought my kids and my wife to a trip that was related to the program, where I was monitoring and doing telecommunications assessment, because I just wanted to take them to the zoo, because usually the weekends were very boring, but they kicked me out for that. So I was told to get out of the program because I wanted to bring my kids to the zoo, and that was taboo. So, I was very kind and respectful, but behind my eyes, if you get in my brains, I would have been cursing you out, saying, if I can't have my kids and wife, then I don't want any part of the program anyway. So that's how I left the program. But that's inside the program. It was a lot of really strange conversations and debriefings with the leadership and their staff at all these different locations, and then reporting on the final reports, the analysis, and all that kind of stuff. That was quite telling. I mean, we'd go over with a fine tooth comb all the conversations and all the different things we had, and just a lot of strange conversations that were just everything you could imagine that people have been dabbling around with, like Eben, that term I know of. Command, I know that one. I've heard that one. All the different, the only two races are tall whites and grays. So yeah, I got to be there for all those kind of conversations.
Do you
Jeez.
believe
And
Do you believe that the US government is involved in a reverse engineering program? And do you think that if you think they are, do you think that a lot of the stuff that we see in the sky, or some people witness in the sky, is actually reverse engineered technology that is, well, now human?
yeah, I'd say so. Uh, I would say that any nation like Russia, China, they probably got their own crash retrievals as well. So yeah, reverse engineering is something that's common amongst nation states. and we're no different. So yeah, it's definitely a program. I do believe that, I wasn't alive back in Roswell days, but I do believe that that was part of it.
Yeah.
Um, and that maybe there were some mistakes made about how we handled that situation. And that's kind of confirmed by a guy who didn't even get to be part of the program. And I think his name was Herman, but he claims that he was taken up into a UFO by some Greys, and the Greys had said that they had confronted the people in the program, that they wanted their crashed survivors and the bodies and the material returned to them because it's theirs, but they were treated very badly. And they asked Herman, "Can't you speak to your country and nation's leadership and get our stuff back, because this is not right?" And Herman was like, I'm a nobody. I can't just walk into the president's office." And then the Greys were also telling, "Well, then we're just going to have to take up our grievances with our government," and all that kind of good stuff. So there's stuff out there that already corroborates some of that Roswell incident from other people. And I did hear about some related information about that particular problem about returning materials and things. And that's something that is still something I would like to just keep alive, because I know there are good people in the program. And I would rather they not suffer the kind of consequences that I had overheard on some of the conversations, because apparently there's going to be some grave consequences if the program does not return what they have from off-world or from these other beings, or other civilization that is unknown, I guess is the way that a lot of people would like me to talk about it. Um, and yeah, that's how it went.
So the best way I can put this, I guess, is that a lot of people believe that the US government has asked permission to backwards engineer technology, and in return, they allow things like abductions to happen. Now, I know you have to be very careful about what you say, and I don't want to get you in any trouble here. But is there an element of that you believe to be true, or have you seen any evidence of that in the past?
Yeah. There were talks of laboratory environments where these beings were allowed in and out. The beings, for the most part, did not want any humans around at all. They actually had rules about humans entering a lab only after any entities from these unknown civilizations, to after they had exited, then these humans would be allowed to come through. So that's why I'd say that these are not humans, because they were referred to in the laboratory environment as distinctly not human. And they had different jobs to do. Like the tall whites would be in the control room. They would set up the experiment or whatever they were doing, and then the humans would come in and they would conduct the experiment, and then the Greys would come in and clean up everything and make sure there was no evidence or uh, technologies that they didn't want the humans to have afterwards. So it was very controlled, very managed. For some reason, they did agree to that kind of a program, and technological exchange, if you will. But it was very controlled, and it was obvious to me that they were the entities did not want to really be there in the first place. So it was sort of a strained relationship, and I believe that's telling, because if you think about it, if it is strained like that, then you know that the only thing that they would ever agree to is something that has some kind of mutual benefit to them.
Right.
And I think that, yeah, that may have led to some of the triangular shaped craft that people see, and they think they call the TR whatever
What
3.
I saw
Yeah,
when I was a
TR3.
kid, that was
Yeah,
the thing that I saw. My God, it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life.
hmm
With
Well, if you can imagine, like I was getting at, it's just the mission type there would be of mutual benefit to both the humans and the entities, because both the entities would want the retrieval operation to take place before anybody could show up, and then they could take the craft and bodies or survivors for themselves, rather than having another mess on their hands like Roswell was, where all kinds of chicanery apparently happened, and so there may be a mutual benefit there.
just to clarify for people watching and for the people that don't have the benefit of having listened to your other spaces, can you just, you know this information because you had access through the program to the communications where all of this was in, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. And then I guess I should be more clear about what I feel is my analytical conclusion about it, as opposed to something I actually had heard was going on and had reported on. So I'll try to be a little bit better through the conversation. But it was an analysis that perhaps the TR3, that, or what people claim is the TR3, may be a mutually built or manufactured craft that serves a mission that both the humans and the other entities have a bit of skin in the game with. They both want to be on site at a retrieval first. I think that's something both of them would want. The entities would want to have the no prisoners taken kind of a thing, and then the craft themselves be returned to whomever it belonged to. And I think that the program people would also want the same thing, because that way they can preserve their relationship with the entities and say, look, aren't we great people? You know, isn't it great we've built this craft together so that we could do all these great missions together? You know,
Sounds
it kind of makes sense. They would have that.
jurisdictional almost, like if a plane were to crash like on the border of say Mexico and Texas or something, and it's like the, you know, our officials show up, but then on the other side, so do officials from Mexico, because half the plane's sticking into their country, and there's like a conversation that's had there. That's what that reminds me of. Not to say that it's exactly the same. Obviously, it's quite different. But Jay, I'm really, really curious because of everything that you're saying right now. Have you ever? I need to think of how to word this right. Have you do you have the belief, based on anything you've been exposed to, that there is technology being operated by humans that we didn't build, as opposed to something that we reverse engineered and then manufactured? Do you have any reason to believe that there are, say, human pilots operating just UAP that were manufactured somewhere else? Somehow we got it, and now, you know, Ted is flying around in it. You know what I'm saying?
Good old
Mm-hmm.
Ted.
Well, yep. And I would say that this goes along again with my analytical more than actual experience, because I have heard from other whistleblowers that um, there has been what people have said, they've gifted us entire
That's the
craft.
term I've heard. Yep.
Yep. And I have to wonder, well, why would that occur? And I would say that perhaps that has happened from time to time, maybe not all the time, but maybe they exchange an entire craft for one of their prisoners in the program. That might be a reason why, is that we're kind of holding some of their own people hostage. At, you know, early on in the program, where we did capture a few of them. And I'm not convinced that perhaps that the entities wouldn't have gotten better at, you know, not manning the craft, and instead sending drones over the years, you know, and things like this, and maybe that's what they gifted us with. Um, so those are the kind of things that run through my mind analytically, and some of the motivations that might seem feasible to me. That if that we were ever gifted them, I just have to wonder why. I don't think they would just give us a dead giveaway of, here, have fun with this, go make some weapons, thank you.
No, that makes a lot of
I don't think
sense. But
Yeah.
Jay, and I'm sure Digby, I think all three of us would have to ask this question and probably have thought of it before. If we had a prisoner from them, why? If because clearly they're obviously extremely advanced, and you know, and who's to say how far down the line ahead of us they are? Why don't they just come and take them? Do you think that they have like a strict moral code, or maybe not even a moral code, but if some of the other rumors are true, perhaps their programming prevents that? Like, why wouldn't they just come down and swoop up what they want and then just leave?
I think there are stories. Now, I don't know for sure. I'm just saying, I'm going off of what other people have told me since I've
Sure.
become more public. But there are some stories out there that they did try. It did result in some deaths of both humans and entities. And I think then that was one of the things that maybe has given a climate to that sort of operation as being bad.
Gotcha. No, that makes
Because,
sense.
it's bad enough. Well, imagine this, that we don't do that every day to Russia. We don't do that every day to China, that kind of thing. And in this case, we're talking about, like you say, advanced races or beings. And if we really want to do ourselves in, this is a good way to really put our entire human race at risk by being so barbaric. So why would we do that? And that's another thing, again, that analytically and logically, it seems like very bad idea, bad juju to be doing, having that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
So
So let's move on a little bit and cover the other part of this story, because you've had these experiences, you've seen what you've seen, you've had access to these top secret communications, you've been involved with the program for 4 years in the 90s. We fast forward to today. Um, you've decided to come forward as a whistleblower. And I don't
yeah,
think a lot of people understand what that process is. And I think it would be really helpful for people to understand what that process is, what you have to go through, what checks, what gives validity to your story, and the toll it takes. Because we're seeing whistleblowers come forwards now from all sorts of different areas. Boeing, for instance, the first one that comes to mind.
Hmm.
And we've all
Yeah.
heard what we believe has happened to some of those whistleblowers. So can you just paint sort of a bit of a picture and what enables you to be a whistleblower, and just and allow for people to understand?
sure. I think whistleblowers can come several different ways to the Congress. You can come as a concerned citizen through some sort of required legal testimony, or I think there's a third category that kind of fell under maybe what David Grush went through, because he was already going through the ICIG first and then went through to Congress. So those are, different legal reasons why. But like I said, you can even come as a concerned citizen. And that's kind of how I came into this. That's why David Grush and I don't share the same exact entry into whistleblowing, but we're both considered whistleblowing, because under the legislation, there is no splitting of hairs as to an exact definition that only these types of people can be whistleblowers. The other thing I'd like to say is that whistleblowing is not easy. I'm currently suffering loss of clearance and loss of job, all that kind of good stuff. And this was after being interviewed and told my employers I'm a UAP whistleblower. So I feel like this was something they took retribution on me after a while, because of one reason or another. And it's not easy. So I know that some of the other whistleblowers have actually suffered threats, death threats, their cars broken into. I've had my car broken into 3 times,
Hmm.
and things like that. I don't go around scanning for hidden cameras, but who knows? Maybe if I did, I'd find some. But I know the other whistleblowers have suffered that. Um, and they feel their lives are at risk. And yeah, I'd say that's a reality. I mean, there's some real stories out there, and people dying or suiciding themselves under very strange circumstances. So it's not an easy path. You kind of have to be on mission. You have to really decide this is for me. And when Congress asked me to come and talk to them back in 2022, I had to think long and hard about that. And I guess part of my calculus back then was that, my wife and I were separated. So I was kind of on my own, that, I didn't see her being uh, a part of the calculus at that point. And so I went forward, as because one of the committee members actually asked me. They said, "Can you come talk to us?" And I said, "Okay," and I did. And they did the verifications. I am just like any other whistleblower, whether you're Eric Davis or David Grush. No, I didn't sneak out with any documents, but literally all the whistleblowers, all you can do is check their background, that they were where they were and did what they did, that they do have clearances, that they're credible, and all these other good things. So all of us stand on that credibility. because honestly, as a whistleblower, you can't drag a UFO or an alien out of the program and say, oh, here you go. This is what you're looking for. Come on over here. Check it out. This is Bob from the planet wherever, that just isn't going to happen. So we're in a court case where it's kind of like where the whistleblowing is about the same level as a court case where, you've got literally 40 to 80 witnesses to a murder crime scene, that kind of a thing. And, that would be something quite telling if you had 40 to 80 witnesses all see the same thing, and we don't even know each other. And that's kind of the case with whistleblowers. We don't know each other. I only know like maybe two others out of the 40 to 80 of us. So it's quite telling that, how does 40 or 80 credible people with clearances, many of them with clearances, come forward having the same concerns? I think that's a very telling thing.
I agree.
I think, so you can see that, I've got my feelings about the whole thing, that yes, it could be handled a lot better.
Are you able to, and if you're not able to disclose, please just don't, but are you able to disclose who you came forward to, who you spoke to when you were at Congress, or is that not allowed to be talked about?
I think that will come later. I was asked not to mention each of the committee members who were present. I can tell you that they were congressional committee members. There were anywhere between 5 or 7 different committees that were all represented, both on the Senate side and the House side. That when I was there that day, I was doing about 3 hours on one side. We had lunch, and then 3 hours or 4 hours on the next side. I started off on the Senate side in the morning and then did the House in the afternoon. So it was a fairly long day, but I felt it was needed, and I was there for them, and I still remain here for them. I mean, they've got maybe some testimony this year that they want public testimony, like they did with David Grush and Fravor and Graves. They think they're going to maybe do something similar this year and try to get a little bit further down the road and ask some more pointed questions.
Do you think that you'll be
So I'm here.
involved in anything like that moving forwards?
Perhaps. I think there's some talk about that. I haven't heard anything completely solid yet, but I know my name's come up a few times, so I think that I'm here for them, and if they want me to, I would be glad to do so, along with any other whistleblowers.
I know it's difficult because, I mean, we've spoken to Danny Sheehan, we've spoken to a number of people, we've spoken to you, obviously, at length in the past about being a whistleblower. And there's no compensation in this for you either, is there? You have to
No.
you have to fly to Washington, you have to provide your own accommodation. They don't refund you anything. You're in a position where your coming forward has led to you losing a job. You're still currently trying to get your clearance back. And start another job that you're hoping to start soon, but it's being held up. And if you want to come forwards again for Congress, you also have to pay for your flights and everything like this. And it just, for me personally, it seems really wrong. And at the same time, a lot of people online look at a whistleblower and go, oh, give us all your information. Why are we not getting all your information like they're owed it? And I think that there's a side of this where whistleblowers really, really get a hard time from both the people in the UFO community and also the government. And this is where I really praise Danny Sheehan for what he's doing at the moment, trying to create more awareness for whistleblowers. Tom and I are doing a show with you again later on next month with a roundtable with another of other whistleblowers, which we're really looking forward to. But
Very much.
I'm looking forward.
We need to raise awareness for whistleblowers, what it takes to come forwards, the hardships that they face, and there's people need to appreciate this, and they need to demand. I mean, I'm from the UK. I'm not in the UK, so there's very little I can do on the US side. But if you live in the US, you can speak to your representatives, you can message your congressman or woman and demand for these things to be changed, because these brave men and women all over the country, and not just in the UFO subject, but in all subjects, that are coming forwards to whistleblow on atrocities that are happening around the country, and they're getting no support, and they need your support. They really do.
I totally agree. It's Yeah, I did have to pay my airfare and hotel fees all on my own to come all the way from Hawaii at the time for my first testimony to Washington,
That's
D.C.
disgusting.
And, well, I kind of understood what they were saying. They said that they don't reimburse whistleblowers because it gives the appearance of, we're paying you to come here. Even though that's happened in the past, everybody remembers Ford coming in and, the Democrats
But
all
Jay,
paying her way
if I
through.
may, if they're so interested and so concerned in this subject and know that someone like you or Grush or Fravor has information, and I think the least they can do is give you a ride. You know what I mean? Because I know what you're saying, but I don't know, man. It just feels like you
Yeah.
guys deserve better than that. Something better than what they're doing in the least. Maybe not. Maybe they don't pay for your airfare, but Jesus, maybe a security detail, something so that people aren't breaking into your cars or leaving weird notes and moving things around in your house. Like, it's shocking to me that some of the people that the government officials will call heroes later on are the same people that they didn't do shit for when it was happening. That's what bothers me.
Yeah. And it is hard to take, honestly, as a whistleblower, that you're trying to do the right thing. You're taking great risk to do things to help your nation. I mean, that's the way I look at it, and all the other whistleblowers in this particular topic. But yeah, whistleblower is not just for the UAP community. It's actually all whistleblowers are treated like this, and that's where, honestly, after the film is out, I would love to get a fund off the ground where it's a place where whistleblowers can contact a person like myself who wants to come in discreetly and anonymously and get help to go forward to Congress or wherever they feel I need to file their complaint. Also, some of these members and people in the program, including myself, have suffered PTSD. There are some people who have been exposed to toxins in that program near the burn pits, or even handling it in a laboratory environment that maybe they got exposed to. There are a multitude of things that whistleblowers just don't have a lot of access to because it's been for these very black world type programs where they can't talk about much of why did they get exposed to it. And here they are getting cancer, or they're suffering PTSD and they can't keep their head straight on things because they've lost it at some point because of what they got exposed to. It's not an easy thing to go through a program like I did and all the other guys and have a face-to-face conversation with what you think is an off-world entity and not have it shake you to the core. I mean, honestly, that is not. It's almost it's as traumatic as walking up on a scene of horrible, a horrible scene of murder or something. You just you react kind of the same way. Um, so yeah, I agree with you that yeah, it's horrible, but that seems to be the tradition that they expect of all the whistleblowers is just to come do it on your dime. Do it for free. And oh, God forbid you ever want to raise a fund for yourself or make any money at this or
Mm,
have to put bread on the table.
Well,
right.
I feel that that's something, I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to do this. If I ever have to, if I just don't get my job back because they continue to mess with my clearance for however long until I can't take it anymore financially, then yeah, I'm going to have to do something else. And that's kind of where I'm at with all this. You can guess where I'm going with my train of thought. It's just one of
mm.
those things where, yeah, we need to do something better for all of this. This is not the kind of environment that's conducive to proper whistleblowing and caretaking, if that makes
It
sense.
does.
Oh, it absolutely does. And the thing is, all this is doing is preventing from other people from coming forward and doing the same. I think you're already putting yourself in harm's way by becoming a whistleblower anyway, and then to think that you're going to have to live on the breadline, or you could lose everything, you could lose your house. Tom and I were speaking to another whistleblower in another field, a month ago, Tom, and
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
lost his house, he's lost one of his cars, he's about to lose his second car, his wife's just had a baby, and it's crazy. And this is in a different field, but the story is, the same all round.
It's just
So
unreal.
it really takes a very brave, special type of person to sort of take that risk and go, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, and you're talking about a lot of different things that we'll talk. I'll try to have more detail when we have our other talk with the roundtable whistleblowing, and I'll kind of describe some of the things that are really entailed in caretaking, what I think caretaking should be. And I'm not sure exactly who could provide it, but we can talk about all that.
We just want to
Jason,
help.
tell me, has there been an instance, you would say, where since coming forwards, you've felt that your life has been threatened or you feared for your life because of coming forwards?
Yes, the past month or two, yeah, I do feel that way. I know they have assets that can be used in the program to take people out discreetly and professionally, so it doesn't look like it was anything but a suicide. Yeah, I know that they can do those things. I don't think that they're doing that to me for some reason. I think they're just going to let it kind of go, because it's one thing to take somebody out and then kind of leave a mark saying, yeah, these people are nasty, they need to be taken out now. And then there's another way to handle this where if they just keep their mouth shut, it just goes away. And people are so fickle with their uh, with the topics for the day. They might think it's really important this week, but then next week they just totally forget it, and all they want to do is see the next movie.
It's a great point.
Do you think it's safer
attention
for
span.
you being in the public eye? Do you think coming forwards has actually sort of in some way protected yourself
Yeah,
from these things?
yeah. Well, for example, everybody can see I'm a happy guy. Yeah, I'm suffering under some weight on my clearance, but you can see and hear the tone of my voice that I'm a good I feel good. I'm healthy. I'm not suicidal. And coming public, everybody knows that by the thousands. That you can see I'm okay.
Yeah.
And and that does give you some protection. Besides that, I've got my dead man switch with certain individuals.
Mm.
I've already named the names and everything else that's involved, and they do something to me. Well, guess what? The ticking time bomb goes off, and the death switch gets pulled.
I didn't know you had
So
something. I mean, I assumed you would, but that's a good order of protection, because what you're doing. I mean, if you really think about it and just break it down really simply, it's like you worked for one of the most powerful entities on this planet as far as government, military, things of that nature, with access to incredible technology, even just human technology. Some of it is absolutely astounding, powerful, and these are really, really smart people that if they want to get rid of somebody and try to make it look a certain way, like if anybody can do it, it's them. And I mean, they had a heart attack gun before I was born. Like it was shown in like a congressional hearing in like the 70s. So think about it. I'm sure they have something way better now. Being out in the public like this, if it were me, it would feel like my only option for protection, honestly. Like, what else are you supposed to
it
do?
would be, yeah. And the other thing I would like to mention is that going public is just one aspect of the whole thing. I would like to also bring up the fact that not everybody's after you inside the program. It's only certain really kind of evil-minded individuals that do it and participate in that kind of thing. And even then, they don't get to make that decision all on their own. It's not in a vacuum. So I know that if what I'm hearing is true, I know the Pentagon and the people that I've worked for are about 50-50 on disclosure right now. It's closer to disclosure than it ever has been before. And when I say disclosure, though, it's not going to be of the weapon systems and what
Right.
we keep our nation's security
I
wrapped around.
respect
I
that.
don't want that.
Yeah,
I think everybody in the world understands the difference between national security and we're not alone.
Right.
One is totally unclassified. The other one has a lot to do with stuff we just don't want to talk about. And yeah, that's the line I also draw. And that's something I want to say about the program people is that they understand that there's certain things and aspects of what they're doing that really have no business whatsoever being kept secret. But then again, I don't know all the mistakes they've made and maybe all the different agreements they've made. and perhaps they just don't want to don't want to admit that there is another presence in this world from another civilization, because they kind of made some mistakes with that civilization, and that perhaps what they did to that civilization, everybody in the world would be like, "You've got to be kidding me! You did what?" You know.
I've heard stories.
Um, yeah, and I think that's the kind of thing that they might be leery of when it comes to coming forward themselves. But those are things they're going to have to tackle on their own, because, like I said, there's parts of it, like the NHI presence, is totally unclassified. I know that from day one, when the commander showed me around the base and said all the things he said, and he mentioned that, this one portion of the area up there near Dreamland, that that's kind of like an embassy where this weatherman, like Mr. Hall said. I think if you listen to Mr. Hall, that's exactly what I think is going on there. Mr. Hall has a really big 2 hour or something interview he did on YouTube that he describes everything he did as a weatherman.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, I believe him, because when he started talking to me about what his job was, it sounds exactly what the commander said, because I was shown the weatherman site, and he literally told me that it is exactly what Mr. Hall said. The guy can walk anywhere he pleases on that base, and he doesn't even need a clearance. And that's exactly what Mr. Hall says.
You're talking
So,
about Charles Hall?
yep, Charles Hall.
Gotcha. Yeah, he wrote
He's still alive.
UFO Chronicles, I believe.
Correct. Yep, and something hospitality.
Yeah, and it's specific. I think he specifically was the one that brought the tall whites into the conversation, if I remember correctly. Like, he was like the first person.
He would interface with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he actually describes what it was like to interface with the tall whites, because his position wasn't just to monitor the weather, but he was also there to kind of be like a ambassador. And the way he describes it, the tall whites would come up and talk to him, and they look at his equipment, and they would, ask him certain questions, just so that they could kind of exchange ideas on culture and other things like that.
That's so mind blowing to even picture in my mind right now. I mean,
I'm telling you,
wow.
Yes. Same thing with me. It was mind blowing to me. I never really thought much about UFOs until I got in the program. But once you're exposed to it, you're forced to think, wow, this stuff is real. And you have to accept all the strangeness along with that, because you just, like, your mind got blown, but here it is, sticking, right there in front of you. You can't deny it any longer. And I wish everybody could have that kind of experience, and then there'd be no question. And but everybody doesn't get that experience. That's the problem.
Have you had any experiences since leaving the program? Some people say that once they've had one sighting, they've had one experience, it carries on. But has that been the case for you?
Yep. Well, like I said, the incident in the desert was after I was read out. I've had other experiences with when I was stationed at RAF Mildenhall, UK. I experienced a UFO encounter there where I have missing time, about 20 or 30 minutes of missing time. And then I've seen the triangular craft 3-4 times when I was down in Florida, where I retired out of. I retired out of Hurlburt Field, and so I've seen the craft around the Eglin airspaces there. This is pretty expansive down there too. They've got a lot of places to hide stuff. And I've seen a couple of other craft throughout my life. Once as a 10-year-old, that was my first real UFO encounter, I'd say. And involved a friend of mine as well, Eddie, at the bottom of the street, and he claims there was some strangeness that happened there because the UFO was right over his house. And then also, when I was just helping my wife load the car from a Home Interiors get together where she was selling some items from Home Interiors, and I was loading the car, and lo and behold, there's another UFO, and it flew out over the Gulf and disappeared. So I've seen them quite a bit. But I only recall the desert encounter and face to face. I do have some missing time incidents around that day as well as the other morning when I was just driving to work, and I encountered the one going to work when I was there in England. So those are the two times I distinctly remember there being some missing time.
Amazing.
Wow. The missing time thing
Absolutely amazing.
too. I don't know if you would agree, Jay, but and it's not my theory, but it's what I've always thought, that the missing time is actually a side effect of their technology, because if you think about a craft moving around and seemingly not being affected by inertia and things of that nature, it would appear that it's generating like a field or something of that nature around itself, where it's like I get to have all the rules and break the other rules bubble around myself. Elizondo has been talking about this recently, and that if you were inside of that, because gravity and time and space are inexorably linked, there, as Elizondo said, two sides of the same coin, that if you were to, say, go inside of their craft for any duration of time and then come out, it would create a disruption in at least your perspective of time in the least. Do you think that makes
Right.
sense?
Yes. To a certain degree, I can understand where if you're in the constancy of time in a normal day, that, yeah, if you went into a time like a time bubble, do you actually retain those memories or do you not when you come back out of the bubble? And I can say that, yeah, maybe scientifically your brain cells wouldn't have changed,
That's interesting.
when you entered and exited. So maybe there's some science there that you could explore, but I don't know for sure. I would think that, cognitively, if there may be another way around that. I just don't know enough about the what that would all mean. But yeah, I could see that happening. But I definitely, like, for instance, that one at RA, when I was stationed at RAF Mildenhall in the UK or United Kingdom, that was like I was driving along and it was dark. It was like February of very, and I knew that my drive was about 40 to 45 minutes to get down to RAF Mildenhall for where I was living. And usually it doesn't get to be daylight until I'm about over halfway there. And here I was driving in pitch dark, not far from my home, knowing I still had another 20 minutes worth of darkness before I got to work. And the UFO shows up, and all of a sudden, the next thing I remember, it's daylight. And I'm like, well, what happened here, So there's something that happened there, and I can't explain it all, I'm like, yep, something winked out for a bit. But then again, the 20 minutes had passed in reality too. I mean, the sun was up, so I wasn't in a time bubble, but I do have missing time. So maybe it's not connected to a time bubble. Maybe it's more just my memory was wiped or something. I don't know.
You've seen some amazing things, and a lot of people are watching this right now because they know who you are, and they want to hear more and they want to see you, which is great. But there's going to be people watching this that are perhaps new to the subject or are dipping their toe in and they're curious. They don't know what to make of it yet. What would you say to those people who are sort of on the fence or don't know what to think about this yet?
I would say that you're new to this, that this is the first time in my lifetime where we have had this many credible witnesses, many of them from the program itself, coming forward. That gives some credence to what people have been seeing. You have a lot of strange happenings, and I've also been part of the UAP Task Force Forum where we were discussing all the analytics on the videos and things that get captured. And yeah, I've seen personally where they are debunked and that this is a balloon or this is a whatever, and it's not something that's unexplainable. But then there are the cadre that are, and you have the United States government themselves stating that there's stuff up in the sky that we don't understand what it is. They can't explain it. There's data supporting the fact that they don't understand it. It maneuvers in ways that we have no idea how that happens. They have transmedium devices. In other words, it can go from air to land to water or underwater and all these things. These are things that obviously everybody here could admit they have never seen a craft on the flight line that looks like that. They can do all those sorts of things. So who's producing this? And where did that technology come from if it's one of ours? And those are some real questions you have to ask yourself if you're on the fence about this. And why would a guy like me risk things to let people know about this? Is the fact that this is important. To me, this is the most important question for mankind right now. And that's why I'm doing this. And a lot of the other people are the same way that have come forward, the whistleblowers. And so for those people, like, again, on that fence, think about how seriously I'm taking it and the other whistleblowers are taking it. Think about how many, probably millions now, people have reported these things. And not just craft in the sky, but they've actually seen them landed. They've been inside of them. Some of them claim to be abducted by them. All sorts of different stories going on. And they can't all be wrong. Let me put it that way. Even if one of them is right, that means that all of it is right about there's something else out there.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You are. One last question before we wrap up. I think, and this is more sort of for you personally and how it makes you feel. There's a lot of people that think, well, how does this work with religion? Does this make you question Christianity if you are a religious person? I mean, for me personally, since I got into this, I've actually found myself probably being more of a spiritual person than I ever have, and found myself sort of coming back towards religion, and actually, because for me, it kind of actually fits better if there is something more out there. How would you say that it affects you, and what faith you may have?
I, like you, my faith was strengthened by my experiences because everything that I saw, because I hadn't read my Bible front to back until I had been in the program for a bit, and I finally finished reading it. And I just was left with this is nothing that hasn't been written about in the Bible. There's the good and the bad. I see it. I just happen to see the reality of it, just like, some of the, the prophets had seen things in the sky. That I believe it was Isaac who got, he actually said he saw sons of God, and he invited them in the tent to have food with him. And then he had his baby at an old age. And that's reality. I mean, you're talking about he brings an entity that he knows is not a human into his tent just to have lunch with them. And, that is a reality that he had. If that encounter is true inside the Bible, then yeah, I don't see where the Bible has anything wrong, that we are in that kind of a spiritual battle over this earth and ourselves even. Well, I think it's mainly just ourselves.
It does seem that way at the
That
moment.
Yeah, so it strengthened my faith in that way because I was just exposed to the reality of it. And yeah, it did shock me, and I didn't know how to think about it at first. But now that I'm older, wiser, and read through it, I've come to the realization that yeah, it's a lot of things are true.
Hmm.
I mean, the Bible describes what happened to Satan and his minions. Well, they were cast where? It says from heaven as to earth. And I did see some pretty nasty stuff and hear some pretty nasty stuff that was going on. And yeah, I would call that kind of demonic. But then again, I can't dismiss the good angels either, because the demons are just bad angels, but the angels also are reality, that those are probably the other races, because they're described as seraphim, Nephilim, or not Nephilim, but cherubim, and all these other beings. So we're not the only created beings according to the Bible. So to me, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So it doesn't tear my religion out of me. It just makes me realize that the Bible's all the more real.
Yeah.
It's an interesting perspective. Because I swear, with so many aspects of society and human life, as time goes on, what was once called something is now called something else, and there's this evolution of language. And if you go and read the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, the Aluma Elish, the Epic of Gilgamesh, I mean, it goes on and on and on. You're seeing these things described with the same, like the similar morphologies, characteristics, traits. what we would now call the observables. Um, those things were described thousands of years ago. The Foo Fighters during World War II. It's like if any country on this planet had anything like that during World War II, it would have ended much faster, and there would have been no nukes dropped. It so it's like for anybody to say that this is like adversarial technology, I'm like, well, maybe now some of it maybe, but it wasn't that during World War II, World War One, during the time of the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Sumerians. Like, we have been seeing this stuff, for lack of a better term, for all of human history. It's here, and it's been here, and it's still here, and it's interacting with us. And I'm not really, I'm spiritual, like I like to say, but I will say that the phenomenon definitely played a massive role, just like you said, Jay. It in a different way. They strengthened my belief in each other, right? Like the phenomenon and spirituality, they blended and meshed together so nicely. I'm like, oh my God, this makes sense. And I see all of these different threads in so many different religions. And it says to me that I think a lot of the religions on this planet find their genesis in our interactions with non-human intelligence. Like, that's why we have religions to begin with, is because of our interactions with them.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say that further, as I was saying to you guys earlier, that before I think we started the show, that I've been exploring my Native American heritage, and I'm really appreciative that they also have thousands of years of what they call the sky world in their traditions. And again, they speak of a creator, they speak of the sky people, they speak of all these things. And that's another aspect of this, is that these are things that people have seen. It's real. Um, it's an ongoing thing. To a certain degree, I think that whoever is contacting us is not overtly trying to destroy our path forward. They're trying to preserve our own freedom to walk our path the way we should. But then again, I do see some tinges of these evil-minded ones that do want to either subjugate us, manipulate us, influence us for their own gain. And that's the difference here. So I would say that in retrospect, that taking all that into context, well, how do you be wise in these times if we're actually going to get to disclosure? How do you weed out the good and the bad, or the bad from the good? And I would say, literally, if I was to say that from what I've experienced, if any of these entities come forward bearing gifts and all these technologies and stuff, beware. The ones that are good that I know of and have participated with are very spiritual, and all they did was they were there to protect and encourage. They did not want to take anything from me or this earth. They were just there because they wanted to help. And that's the difference between the two. So if you want to be wise in these times that might be coming our way, that's the two factions, and that's how you get around that, and that's how you be wise with what's going on. Is one's going to come bearing all these miraculous gifts, and those are the ones that are going to be the bad guys.
Beware aliens holding gifts.
Exactly. Yep.
I think that's fair.
I think
even the Bible kind of, it says even in the Bible that's how it's described.
Well, yes,
it
quite.
says that they'll come performing. It says that the evil one will come performing great miracles, and he's going to confuse people.
Yeah.
So
it does say
that's what a lot of the other.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're right.
And a lot of the other scriptures say so too.
Jason.
Definitely
anyway.
does.
Thank you so much for your time. I'm really looking forward to our roundtable later on next month. That will be featured on the Unidentified Anomalous podcast, my old channel that now Tom has taken over the reins of. So I will be making a guest appearance on that show, which I cannot wait. Jason, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your time and the viewers your time. I know it will be well received and everybody will really appreciate it. And just from me personally, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for being so brave, and thank you for continuing on.
Yeah, thank you also, Digby. I know you're standing up for what you feel is right in this world, and I appreciate your bravery to do that,
Thank you, man.
because I know you're taking some fiery barbs for that. So I appreciate you.
Well, that's
For
one of the
sure.
reasons why I separated myself from Tom's show, so I can come on here and be as outspoken as I like without any.
Because I'm too much of a wimp. No, I'm just kidding.
Without any
I'm
ramifications
nuts.
hitting Tom. But no, I mean, and to be fair, Jay, seeing what you do and having the bravery that you have is one of the things that spurred me on to do something that I could do. I'm not a whistleblower, but I have a voice and I intend to use it. And some people may appreciate that, some people may not.
Right on.
But while there is still an ounce of freedom of speech in my country, not that I live there anymore, I will use it. But I tell you what, though, being British and thinking of the fact that in the next month or two I'm going to have to pop back home, I worry if anything's going to be used against me. My wife said to me the other day, "Do you worry that when we go back to England, you'll get picked up at the airport?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And
That
that's
is so
talking
strange.
about my country.
I'm telling you, it's a strange world we're living in. I can't believe that is actually happening.
They have made 1,000 arrests in the last 4 weeks.
That's frightening. I'm sorry, but that is Orwellian to me.
Yeah,
it just
some
is.
Of them, granted, some of them were active participants in riots. And if you
and that's understandable,
or beat up a police officer, or you were racist to somebody's face and caused physical harm or criminal damage, then by God, you deserve to spend some time in jail. But if you're Betty from number 32 who was angry one day and had one glass too many of wine and decided to put some stupid racist comment online, you don't deserve 2 years in jail, while they let other people out of jail for things like murder, rape, armed robbery, just so they can put somebody who put some hurty words on Facebook in jail. It is insanity.
People are too soft. Way too soft.
But you're going to have to give us the ground truth there, Digby.
Sorry, say again?
You're going to have to broadcast all the ground truth from
Well, that's what I do. That's what I'm trying to do.
If he's not in jail.
Exactly.
I worry about that, man.
I really do. Using a very good VPN. It's fine.
Yeah, you really should. Nobody should be thrown in jail for having a political opinion that differs from the state. I mean, that is ridiculous. That is the epitome of authoritarianism and totalitarianism. And these are the things that, like, 15 years ago, or here, we'll just go when I started my YouTube channel in 2016. Like, my channel was Man on the Run. Like, that's what I was I was talking about the Illuminati. I was talking about conspiracy theories and all of that. And everything was fine. And then a few years later, and this is just observation, we went through a worldwide global pandemic, and then all of a sudden, it's like people like that are so shunned and so devalued, and they're basically not allowed to speak without repercussions. They're shadow banned. They lose their advertising unless you're, say, like Alex Jones. And I'm not saying Alex Jones is wrong, but what I'm saying is that, like, unless you're, like, established and have a giant audience, it's very difficult for you to truly exercise reasonable freedom of speech in places like YouTube or even on Facebook. And that's why people have flocked to Rumble and X. You've gone through it yourself. I've had videos. I had 3 videos taken down during the pandemic. I was just asking questions. I wasn't even making declarations. So I've seen it, and that's where I'm not making declarations. I'm not telling you who is responsible for what. What I'm saying is that we should have a goddamn right to ask and hold the elites accountable for the weird shit that they do, that we can clearly see some of them are doing. Some of these people are nuts, and they have a lot of money, and they get bored, and they do crazy shit. Why is that so shocking to people? I can't wrap my head around that. It's not unbelievable. It's been going on forever.
No, it literally has been going on forever. Anyway, let's wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute
It was an honor.
pleasure. Thank you to everybody who's watched this episode of Man on the Run. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share with all your weird and wonderful friends. And from me, until next time, God bless and stay free.